For years, the Epstein scandal lived in the shadows, protected, buried, and guarded by some of the most powerful figures in America. But this week, everything shifted. And the person caught in the center of this explosive political earthquake was Donald Trump himself. Because for the first time in his political career, Congress didn't bend, didn't stall, and didn't wait for him. Instead, they forced his hand with a historic move that could expose secrets people once believed would never see daylight. What just happened wasn't just another political fight. It was a complete collapse of the long-standing fear that kept lawmakers silent. And now, with the Epstein files on the verge of being released, the stakes have suddenly risen to a level Trump never expected. For years, Trump's power inside Washington worked the same way. Intimidation, pressure, and the expectation that Republicans would fall in line long before a confrontation ever happened. But the House vote on the Epstein Files Bill shattered that pattern in one blow. Two numbers made history, 427-1. That wasn't just a victory, it was a political revolt. A moment where lawmakers across the entire spectrum, left, right, and everything in between, decided that protecting survivors mattered more than protecting a former president's preferences. Behind the scenes, lawmakers admitted something only whispered before: Trump's influence was slipping. Not because he lost support, but because this issue was radioactive. No one wanted to be remembered as the person who blocked justice for victims who had been ignored for years. And for Trump, this overwhelming bipartisan unity wasn't just surprising, it was humiliating. Because for once Congress didn't ask permission, they acted. But the Senate wasn't done delivering shocks yet. When the Epstein Files bill moved from the House to the Senate, Trump's inner circle believed they still had room to maneuver. They expected the Senate to slow things down, negotiate amendments, or at least create procedural delays that would buy the administration time. For years, this was how controversial legislation moved in Washington: slow, quiet, and always with enough back-channel influence for a president to shape the outcome. But that familiar playbook collapsed the moment the bill reached the Senate floor. Instead of hesitation, the Senate delivered a shock that no one around Trump saw coming: a unanimous vote. Not one senator objected. Not one demanded changes. Not one stepped forward to defend Trump's position or support the Speaker's attempt to stall the process. In a chamber known for gridlock, infighting, and endless debate, the complete lack of resistance was more revealing than any speech. It showed how politically radioactive the Epstein issue had become, and how unwilling senators were to be remembered as the reason survivors were denied justice yet again. Behind the scenes, aides described a sense of urgency spreading through both parties. Senators knew public pressure was growing. Survivors had testified. Lawyers who'd seen portions of the files had spoken out. National outrage was reaching a point where silence was no longer safe. So even Trump's closest allies stepped aside. They didn't defend him. They didn't soften the blow. They simply let the bill pass, fully aware that doing anything else would ignite a national firestorm. And in that single moment, Trump's long-held expectation that Republicans would shield him automatically broke apart. The Senate's unanimous vote wasn't just legislative action. It was a message delivered loudly and publicly. This time, no one was going to protect him, and the fallout from that decision was only beginning. If there was one figure who walked away bruised from this entire showdown, it wasn't Trump, it was Speaker Mike Johnson. For weeks, Johnson had quietly resisted the Epstein Files bill. He questioned its scope, hinted at procedural concerns, and signaled that Republicans needed more time. But when the House vote arrived, everything he tried to control slipped right through his hands. The final tally, 427-1, wasn't just overwhelming, it was humiliating. Johnson ended up voting for the very bill he attempted to slow down, not out of conviction, but because opposing it would have destroyed him politically. But the real embarrassment came next. As soon as the bill moved to the Senate, Johnson made a final attempt to assert himself. He pushed the idea that the Senate should revisit parts of the legislation, add protections, or at least delay the vote. This wasn't about policy, it was an effort to show Trump he was still loyal, still fighting, still useful. What he didn't expect was how fast the Senate would reject him. Senator John Thune, one of the most influential Republicans in the chamber, didn't even pretend to negotiate. He brushed past Johnson's request and allowed the bill to move forward without a single change. No delay, no debate. No courtesy. The Senate sent a clear message. They were not risking their careers to give Johnson political cover. By the end of the day, Johnson looked isolated, weakened, and ignored by the very people he believed would stand with him. Trump didn't defend him. Senate Republicans didn't defend him. Even his own colleagues whispered that he had been hung out to dry. What happened to Johnson wasn't just political embarrassment, it was a public reminder that Trump's power wasn't protecting his allies the way it once did. And the consequences of that shift were about to spread even further. For years, the Epstein scandal felt like a dark cloud hovering over powerful men, whispers of secret flights, hidden guest lists, and stories survivors tried to tell long before anyone listened. But the true scale of what's inside the Epstein files is far bigger than the public realizes. These aren't just a few documents or scattered notes. Survivors' lawyers who have seen portions of the materials describe them as a detailed web of names, dates, interactions, and patterns of behavior that point far beyond Epstein and his closest associates. According to people familiar with the files, they include flight manifests, communication logs, personal correspondence, deposition transcripts, sealed statements, and records that link influential figures to Epstein's private network. Survivors who testified say the documents contain accounts of powerful individuals who visited the infamous island, stayed at his properties, or associated with him during years when disturbing behavior was unfolding behind closed doors. Many of these names have never been mentioned publicly, creating an atmosphere of tension among the wealthy elite who were once confident their connections would shield them. Rumors circulating online suggest that the files could implicate prominent businessmen, high-profile academics, political insiders, and celebrities who maintained close ties to Epstein even after his first arrest. Reports claim that some documents detail how young victims were targeted, transported, and silenced, painting a picture of a system that prioritized protecting power over protecting people. None of these claims have been officially confirmed, but the survivors' consistent descriptions have fueled widespread speculation. What makes these files so explosive is not just the potential names involved, but the pattern they reveal, a pattern of neglect, influence, and protection that span decades. And for the first time, those documents are on the verge of becoming public, but revealing what's in them is only the beginning. The real fight is whether they will be released honestly, without being altered or buried. As soon as news broke that Trump would be the one overseeing the release of the Epstein files, the internet erupted with the same question: can he block them? After all, Trump has already shown he's willing to push boundaries, pressure institutions, and bend systems in ways no president had tried before. And with Pam Bondi leading the DOJ under his administration, many feared the files could be altered, redacted, or released in a watered-down form that hides the most damaging details. But this time, things aren't as simple as presidential preference. The new bill changes everything. It doesn't request the files, it forces them into the light. Under this law, career officials, not Trump loyalists, not political appointees, are responsible for carrying out the release. And if they fail to comply, they aren't just breaking protocol. They're breaking the law. For the first time, not releasing the Epstein documents is a criminal offense, one that carries real penalties and long-term consequences. The risk isn't just upsetting Trump. It's facing future investigations, subpoenas, and potential charges long after his presidency ends. Lawmakers familiar with the process say the DOJ can no longer rely on the old strategy of political protection. Because now, every career employee involved has to think about what comes after Trump. What if a different president takes office in 2029? What if Congress changes hands again? The fear has shifted. Protecting Trump might buy short-term loyalty, but violating federal law could destroy a career permanently. And even if the administration tries to play games, delays, partial releases, quiet redactions, the bill's supporters say they'll know. Survivors' lawyers have seen portions of the files. Independent Epstein estate documents already exist. Former DOJ officials know what's inside. Any attempt to scrub or manipulate the record would be obvious. But even with all these safeguards, one final loophole still hangs over the process, and it's powerful enough to change everything. Even with the new law tightening every screw around the release of the Epstein files, one massive loophole still hangs over the entire process. A loophole powerful enough to reshape the outcome with a single signature. It's the presidential pardon. And for Trump, it has always been his most dangerous weapon. Throughout his presidency, he used pardons to shield allies, reward loyalty, and signal to insiders that protecting him came with benefits. Now, many fear he could use that same power to protect anyone who tries to interfere with the Epstein release. If a DOJ official were to break the law, delay the files, scrub names, hide documents, or manipulate the process, Trump could theoretically wipe away their punishment instantly. No trial, no consequences, no accountability. That possibility terrifies lawmakers who spent years watching Trump turn pardons into a political tool. And it's why some members of Congress are now calling for something that once seemed impossible: removing or radically restricting the presidential pardon power altogether. But even Trump's pardon power has limits. A pardon could protect someone from federal charges, but it can't erase their career. It can't stop Congress from hauling them in for questioning. It can't protect them from state-level investigations. And it definitely can't protect them from what comes next when a different president takes office. A pardon may clear a criminal record, but it doesn't erase a paper trail or the public fallout that follows. Still, the mere existence of the pardon option creates an atmosphere of tension inside the Justice Department. Officials know the law demands transparency, but they also know Trump has a history of rewarding those who shield him. It's a high-risk balancing act. And as the release of the Epstein Files draws closer, every career staffer involved is making the same calculation. Is loyalty to Trump worth risking everything? Because even if the pardon loophole exists, the consequences of misusing it could ignite a political explosion far bigger than anything seen so far. Even if no one ends up in handcuffs, the release of the Epstein Files is still capable of destroying lives in a single afternoon. That's the part most people underestimate. Legal consequences are one thing, but reputational fallout, public exposure, career-ending revelations, institutions scrambling to distance themselves, is often far more devastating. And for the people whose names appear in these documents, the real fear isn't prosecution. It's the world finally seeing the associations they spent years trying to bury. Survivors' lawyers have already hinted that the files include logs, records, and statements tying influential men to Epstein's network. And when this information becomes public, universities, corporations, foundations, and major institutions will have no choice but to respond. No board wants to be linked to Epstein. No school wants to explain why a donor or faculty member was tied to a man accused of exploiting minors. No corporation wants its executives answering questions about private flights or secret visits. The backlash alone could collapse careers that once seemed unshakable. Even without criminal charges, the court of public opinion moves fast. Past scandals have shown how quickly endorsements vanish, speaking invitations evaporate, and partnerships end the moment a name becomes controversial. And this situation, because of how long it was suppressed and how deeply it runs, is bigger than anything the public has seen in decades. Some of the individuals connected to Epstein built entire reputations on influence, philanthropy, and respectability. One mention in these files could wipe all of that away overnight. For survivors, this moment represents something far deeper than exposure. It represents validation. After years of being ignored, doubted, or dismissed, their accounts may finally be backed by documents the world can no longer deny. And once those documents are public, the people who once hid behind power will face something they never prepared for: accountability without escape. But even this is only part of the story. Because the real shock came not from the files themselves, but from what Congress did next. What truly stunned Washington wasn't just the bill itself. It was the fact that Congress, for the first time in years, stared Donald Trump in the face and didn't blink. For nearly a decade, lawmakers operated under a quiet assumption. Confronting Trump was political suicide. Republicans feared his base. Democrats feared being ignored in the minority. Both sides feared the backlash that came with challenging a figure who built his power on intimidation and relentless pressure. But the Epstein Files changed everything. This wasn't a typical policy debate. It wasn't about budgets, appointments, or party loyalty. It was about survivors, people whose voices had been silenced for decades. And suddenly, protecting Trump didn't seem worth the cost. When Democrats and Republicans joined forces, they did something that once felt impossible. They forced Trump into a corner. Not by shouting at him, not by threatening him, but by outvoting him so overwhelmingly that he had no choice but to follow. The symbolism was undeniable. A progressive Democrat from California authored a bill that Trump is now required to sign. Republican senators broke with him publicly. His most loyal allies surrendered without resistance. And Mike Johnson, the speaker Trump once relied on, was left looking powerless and exposed. For a man whose brand is built on dominance, being forced to sign a bill he never wanted was more than a political setback. It was a crack in the armor he spent years building. The message to Washington was clear. Trump's power is not absolute. When Congress unites, when lawmakers stop assuming they're helpless, they can push back and win. And now, with the Epstein Files on the verge of being released, that shift in power is bigger than one bill. It marks the beginning of a new phase in Trump's political life, one where even his strongest tools can't protect him from consequences long overdue. Because once these files go public, the truth won't just challenge his influence. It will test the entire system that kept Epstein protected for so long.